Well, William, we're out here now. This is your home place,
It is.
and
Yep.
you're grazing your Milo.
Yes, we are. We got our ewes, our Katahdin ewes out here in our Milo field, our 30-inch regular grain sorghum, and they're foraging around.
And I noticed they're going after seed already.
Yep.
The grain.
Some of the drooping grain heads, yep, they're going to that. They've got some of the fodder leaf. They're going after it all, or as much as they can reach. Sometimes the grain's a little too tall for them before it lodges over and droops down for them to get to.
Okay, all right. No, they'll go for the grain first and then the leaves, or.
Well, I think they've noticed they like the leaves first because that's what's in their face first.
Oh, sure.
It's palatable, something they recognize, more of a kind of more similar to the grass forage that they're normally on. And then they go for the grain heads, and then they might go for the top little quarter of the stem. Might do that.
Okay. Right, because the bottom of the stem got too much leg in there.
It's just so tough, and it's just not near as palatable to them.
Now, you were saying when they first came up here, the older ones are the ones that went right to the grain.
Right, like the older ones are the ones that know best. You can see here, I mean, there's some grain right in this one's face, and she's kind of just looking around at us instead. But
now this Milo was full production for grain, right?
yep, this was grown with the intent of a grain crop, and we just happened to be grazing it with livestock. Now, of course, that was the ultimate plan, but it was managed for grain.
For grain. So this will probably yield 100, 120.
100, 120, yep, right in that area.
Bushel per acre.
Yep.
And but now they will stay on the edges, won't they? More than the cattle will.
Correct. Going back, yep, they're a prey species, so of course they like to see their surroundings a lot more. And Milo's taller, and so they stay together, and they just kind of work the edges first. And the more leaf material that they take away and knock down stems, they can see more, and they go further in.
Now notice your donkey is leaving now.
Yep, she's kind of just looking around. I'm sure she's spooked, or who knows, doing her job. Keep an eye on things, looking around, and
they'll leave and go back with her.
And the ewes will follow her wherever she goes.
Really?
Oh yeah, and they'll follow one another. And
And you also said the donkey eats what the ewes eat.
Yep, the donkey, look, compared to a guard dog, she's a ruminant. She'll eat the same forage, the grain, and everything. And of course, I have some paths knocked down for later fencing, and they'll utilize those areas of sight.
Do you think are they more efficient or less efficient than your cattle with the Milo?
Well, I mean, they're a smaller animal, quite a lot smaller animals, so they waste less. I think.
Do they?
I think they waste less, and their mouths are more small. They're smaller mouths, so they're more particular, and so they can eat the little leaf here and there and every little grain. There's still some waste, of course, but I think they are probably more efficient.
And you probably don't get quite as much pugging as you would with
Not at all.
With the cattle.
Oh yeah, cattle. I mean, a 1,200-pound cow or a 200-pound ewe. Yes.
Now, what are you going to come with this next year then in the 2025?
What's the crop to be planted back? In this particular field, I'll plant Milo here again.
Will you? Okay.
Or you could do soybean, depending on the rotation. This one just happens to be the first year in the rotation, and so I'll do it again. It's right next to my pasture, my water sources, and then after that, we'll go back with soybeans.
Sure. Now, with more fertilized, the Milo's a little taller.
Correct. Yes. Since we grew it, I mean, in the normal 30-inch rows, not wide rows, the plants they compete with each other for sunlight. They had the energy, all the fertility to grow.
And now you had also, do you read what Harry talks about how he'd like to have a little more protein in here? A little more grain, a little more cereal crops or something.
Cereal crop. Yes, my protein source in this is say soybean meal or just a little supplemental grain to balance out and get them the right enough protein.
But if you could keep most of your Milo yield, you could also have like a wider rows and get some that way.
Yes,
too.
That's a possibility you have to utilize wider row spacing in an equal or near equal grain yield of sorghum.
Because one thing that you were talking about, instead of waiting until winter to graze this, start in August when we have a good protein source out there too.
Right, and I can show you a field up towards the other side of this field where I started grazing first in August, and they actually were able to utilize, all of this plant material. It was right there before boot stage, and the plants were still green and tender. It was palatable to them, and they took it down to the ground, and I got off of it, and I grazed it, and it grew back. Grazed it again.
Did you really? So it was really non-grain, but just grazing the sorghum, the
fodder.
The fodder by itself. Well, then you'd probably have a lot of sugars in those stems, then, wouldn't you?
Probably more accessible that sugar as well, since the stem is is less mature. I mean, and they ate it down. I mean, they would eat it to down here. I mean, the plant would be this tall. Right there at the boot stage, they would eat it to the ground almost.
Wow, because it hadn't lignified near as much.
Hadn't lignified, and all that sugar tasted so good to them. I'm really excited to see what some lamb gains could be in a late summer, early fall grazing situation of Milo.
So this Milo was grazed back in August.
Back in August, yes, sir. Back when it was still green. And you can see on this edge here, I mean, they almost made grain again.
So it grazed down to about where we can see it.
Yep, to about right here.
And then it grew back.
And it grew back.
You grazed it again?
Grazed it again. Grazed it again to the ground. And there's other plants over here that did not get touched. And it works out pretty good. You can pan over here and see how much better this looks.
And the difference here is you left them longer?
Yep, I left them on this longer, and they took it closer to the ground. They took it down further. And I think they took out more of the apical dominance of the plant and allowed it to tiller and to grow back from the true base and not out of the top of the plant like this did.
Oh, gotcha.
And how that did, especially because it did not get taken near as low.
So the first time you left them on it longer?
Left it on longer, yep.
But the head was already emerged?
The head we were right there in between flag and boot. So the heads were in the plant still, and some had emerged.
But that's the apical meristem, but grain sorghum still has those buds down at the bottom, doesn't it?
They did, yeah, and that's exactly what this did after we removed the head and all the top growth. And it grew back and we grazed it again almost to the ground.
Wow. Did you kind of give an idea about how much biomass you made off it?
I wish I had taken the square out here and done that. Actually, I talked about doing it. I mean, it was chest high, 30-inch row.
Wow.
There was a lot. I mean, it was.
And probably even that emerging head's got some in it.
Oh yeah. I mean, it was all that milky, unmatured stem.
Well, sure.
Definitely had some nutrition.
And the thing is, when you let them loose out here, it took them a while. So probably toward the end, they were getting some grain, some milky, maybe some.
They might have been, yes, and of course.
Some grain.
And in the beginning, they took this down the same. They took the leaves first mainly, and then they worked on that stem, the upper part of the stem. And because it was still immature, they ate a lot more stem than they would ever eat of this mature sorghum in winter.
Did this grow back as much when you grazed it so heavy the first time as the other one did?
It was a little slower, and it was also right there in a drought. I mean,
sure.
This grew back when we had no rain. Because it had the access to the root system of the existing plant to pull that deeper soil profile moisture from.
That's the neat thing is it still has all those root reserves, root size and root reserves.
Right, and it did grow back a little slower, of course, than the other ones, but we had taken it down far enough that it would actually try to fully regrow the plant and not just tiller out the top.
Now, how did this compare like to a grain sorghum then, not a grain sorghum, but a sorghum Sudan doing the same thing?
I would assume, just by my visual observations, there was probably less tonnage. There was, I would assume, but there might not have been for the same amount of growth. I mean, total, what you could have done with this, I would believe would be less than sorghum Sudan, because sorghum Sudan, I mean, that's been bred. I mean, that's what we have for a true grazing the full ridge there, the leaf material, versus this plant's ultimate intention was to produce even more grain than what sorghum Sudan would physiologically try to produce.
But it gives you options.
It gives you options. Oh yes, I mean I could have chose to not graze this. I mean I could have had this for winter grazing, and say it turned out even drier, and my pastures were gone. I could graze this.
Right.
Versus having to sell off or to buy expensive forage, buy more hay.
Especially when there's a drought.
Especially in a drought. Yes, I'm very excited to see what else we can do with this particular system with lambs. I mean, this was used grazing this, but I'm very curious what the rate of gain would be on young lambs who are no longer challenged by, say, infected endophyte fescue pastures, or especially internal parasites. It's not a big a deal in cattle as sheep, but I mean, like you say, we didn't graze very low. We did, but there are no parasites out here as compared to our fescue pasture where we have our barber pole worm that only crawls so far up the plant. So even if we had our internal parasites, they would not have been grazing that low were they to pick them up.
I'll be.
They normally will graze into satiety or just their physical fill,
Uh-huh.
and they're good. I mean, there's been no issues of bloating or having too much access. I haven't had that problem in the system. I could give them the whole field and they would be fine.
Now, if you started in before frost, with frost you have to pull them off for a while.
Right.
Like
Frost,
2 weeks? Or?
Yeah, about 2 weeks, and there the prussic acid poisoning, the prussic acid levels increase at plant death when it froze.
Are you worried about nitrate poisoning?
So grazing early in the year, since we did fertilize this with urea for grain, there was lots of nitrates, and so and once or twice I tested, and they were really high in nitrates. So I had to pull them off in the August time I was trying to graze. But as far after frost, I haven't had the issue at all. Nope.
And that was confounded by because it being dry too, wasn't it?
Right.
That's why you had the concentration of nitrates.
Right, or dry, or right after a good rain when it was dry, and this plant just sucked it up.
Gotcha.
But luckily, I mean, if there are nitrate issues, it's luckily mainly in the lower part of the stem where they don't even want to touch anyways.
That's good. That's good. So if you did get a little bit late, they probably hadn't gotten poisoned yet.
Not at all.
And if you do like a sorghum Sudan or a pearl millet, you would not have that grain in the fall, just in case you want to go that
Correct. You'd have deteriorating just biomass that wouldn't be near as nutrient value as the grain produced here.
Yep. All right, that's great. Anything else you want to?
Well, just thank you for coming out and taking a look at things.
All right, thanks. Let's go see where they went.
Yes, do it. Thank you.